Picture this: February 14, 1887, Valentine's Day in Paris. While lovers exchange cards and flowers, 47 of France's most famous artists gather in a fancy cafe near the Opera House. They're not there for romance. They're there to stop what they call the most disgusting thing ever built in Paris. What are they so angry about? A tower, an iron tower that doesn't exist yet. A tower that will one day become the most famous building in the entire world. The artists write a letter. They call it the protest against the Tower of Monsieur Eiffel. They say the tower will be useless and monstrous. They say it will look like a giant black factory chimney crushing Paris. They say it will make the beautiful city look ugly forever. The letter gets printed in the newspaper Le Temps on February 14, 1887. Thousands of people read it at breakfast. One artist, a man named Guy de Maupassant, hates the tower so much that later, when it's built, he eats lunch in its restaurant every single day. Why? Because it's the only place in Paris where he can't see the tower. But here's the twist in our story. The man they're protesting against, Gustave Eiffel, doesn't stop building. The workers don't stop climbing. The iron doesn't stop rising. And 20 months later, on March 31, 1889, the tower opens to the public. Today, over 130 years after those artists tried to stop it, the Eiffel Tower is the most visited monument on Earth. 7 million people climb it every year. It's on postcards, posters, keychains, and coffee mugs. When you think of Paris, you think of that tower. When you think of France, you see that iron shape in your mind. The thing they called an eyesore became the symbol of an entire nation. So what happened? How did the most hated building in Paris become the most loved? How did a temporary tower that was supposed to stand for only 20 years end up standing for more than a century? And why did some of the smartest, most creative people in France get it so completely wrong? This is the dark story of the Eiffel Tower. But dark doesn't mean evil. It means hidden. It means the parts they don't tell you in school. It means the real people, the real fights, the real money, and the real danger behind one of the world's most famous landmarks. This is the story of 300 workers who climbed higher than any humans had ever built before. The story of one man who died so tourists could take selfies 130 years later. The story of artists who feared the future and a builder who bet his entire fortune on iron. The story of a tower that was supposed to disappear, but instead taught the whole world what Paris looks like. Let me ask you something before we begin. Imagine you're living in Paris in 1887. You've never seen a skyscraper. The tallest thing you've ever seen is a church. Your whole city is made of cream-colored stone buildings that are maybe 5 or 6 stories tall. Everything is beautiful, everything matches, everything feels like it's been there forever. Then someone tells you they're going to build a 984-foot-tall iron tower, taller than anything that has ever been built anywhere in the world, right in the middle of your city. And it's going to be made of dark metal. And it's going to look like a giant ladder. And it's going to stand there for at least 20 years. Would you be excited, or would you be terrified? Keep that question in your mind as we climb this tower together, floor by floor, year by year, from the mud of 1887 to the lights of today. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's vision begins not with Gustave Eiffel, but with 2 men whose names you've probably never heard, Maurice Koechlin and Émile Naugaire. It's May 1884. These 2 men work as engineers in Eiffel's company. They're sitting in an office in Paris, drawing sketches. They're trying to solve a problem. France is planning a huge World's Fair for 1889. The fair will celebrate 100 years since the French Revolution of 1789. France wants to build something incredible, something that will make the whole world say, wow. Koechlin draws a tower, a really tall tower. He draws it like a pyramid made of iron, getting narrower as it goes up. He shows it to Naugaire. Naugaire likes it. They show it to their boss, Gustave Eiffel. Eiffel looks at the drawing. He's 51 years old. He's already famous for building bridges and train stations all over the world. He built the iron skeleton inside the Statue of Liberty that France gave to America, but he's not excited about this tower idea. Not yet. Maybe, he says, but make it prettier. So Koechlin and Naugaire hire an architect named Stephen Sylvester. Sylvester adds arches at the bottom. He adds decorative metalwork. He adds floors where people can stand and look at the view. He turns the simple iron pyramid into something more beautiful. Now Eiffel gets interested, really interested, so interested that he does something unusual. On September 18, 1884, he buys the exclusive rights to the design from Koechlin and Naugaire. He pays them money so that the tower becomes his project, not theirs. From that day on, history will call it the Eiffel Tower, not the Koechlin Tower. The dark story here is simple. The man who gets the credit isn't always the man who has the idea first. Eiffel spends the next 2 years fighting for his tower. He enters it in a competition run by the French government. The competition asks, what should we build for the 1889 World's Fair? 107 designs get submitted. Some people suggest a giant guillotine to remember the revolution. Some suggest a huge fountain. Some suggest a tower made of granite. Some suggest a tower made of steel. On May 12, 1886, Eiffel wins. The government chooses his iron tower. But there's a catch. The government won't pay for the whole thing. They'll give Eiffel 1.5 million francs, that's about $7.8 million in today's money. But the tower will cost about 6.5 million francs to build, about $33.8 million today. Eiffel has to find the other 5 million francs himself. So Eiffel makes a deal. He'll put up his own money. He'll take all the risk, but in return, he gets to keep all the money the tower makes from tickets for the first 20 years. After 20 years, the tower will belong to the city of Paris. And here's the really important part. After 20 years, the city can tear it down if they want to. Eiffel thinks he can make his money back from ticket sales. He thinks people will pay to climb his tower, but he also knows this tower might not stand forever. It's designed to be temporary, like a fancy tent at a fair, up for a while then gone. On January 8, 1887, Eiffel signs the contract. He is now responsible for building the tallest structure in the world. If it fails, he loses everything. If someone gets hurt, he gets blamed. If people hate it, his name gets ruined forever. Why would a 54-year-old successful man take such a huge risk? Money is part of it. Eiffel thinks he can get rich, but there's something else, something deeper. Eiffel believes in iron. He believes iron is the future. He believes you can build things with iron that you could never build with stone. Higher things, stronger things, more beautiful things. Stone is the past, he thinks. Iron is the future. And he's about to prove it by building something so tall that people will see it from 16 miles away. Meanwhile, on that same January day in 1887, a 23-year-old construction worker named Francois Becker wakes up in a tiny apartment in eastern Paris. He lives with his wife, Marie, and their baby daughter. He works on building sites around the city, carrying bricks, mixing cement, doing whatever pays. Francois has heard rumors about a huge tower being built. Lots of jobs, people say. Good wages, they say. Dangerous work, they whisper. Francois needs the money. He and Marie are barely surviving. So when he hears that Eiffel's company is hiring workers for the tower, he decides to apply. He doesn't know that this decision will put him in the history books. He doesn't know that his daughter will tell his story to her grandchildren. He doesn't know that he's about to help build something that will still be standing 135 years later. All he knows is his family needs money, the tower pays well, and working high up in the air, that's just part of the job. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's vision ends with two men making big bets. Eiffel bets his fortune and his name. Francois Becker bets his life. Only one of them will lose everything. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's building begins in mud, deep, thick, cold Parisian mud. It's January 28, 1887, the first day of construction. But the workers aren't building up. They're digging down, way down. They need to dig huge holes for the tower's 4 massive feet. Each foot needs a foundation that goes deep into the ground. Here's the problem. The tower site is right next to the Seine River. The ground is wet, really wet, soggy like a sponge. If you dig a hole, water fills it up. So the workers have to use special pumps to keep the water out while they dig. It's freezing cold. It's January in Paris. These men are standing in muddy pits in the winter, pumping out water and digging deeper and deeper. They dig for 4 months. 4 months of mud and cold and water and darkness before they even start building up. Each foundation has to go down 46 feet deep on the side near the river. On the other side, away from the river, only 13 feet. Why the difference? Because the ground near the river is softer. It needs more support. Inside each hole, workers build a massive concrete foundation. Each one uses huge stone blocks and thousands of bags of cement. The foundation for each of the tower's 4 legs weighs as much as 15 full-grown elephants. On July 1, 1887, 5 months after they started, the foundations are finally finished. Now the real work begins. Now they start building up. Eiffel has hired about 300 workers. Most of them are men who usually build bridges. They know how to work with iron. They know how to rivet metal together. They know how to climb, but they've never climbed this high before. Nobody has. The tower is built like a giant assembly project. The iron pieces are made in Eiffel's factory in a town called Levallois-Perret, about 4 miles from the tower site. Workers cut and shape 12,000 different iron pieces. Each piece is numbered. Each piece has pre-drilled holes where the rivets will go. The pieces arrive at the site on horse-drawn carts. Remember, this is 1887. No trucks, just horses. Workers use steam-powered cranes to lift the iron pieces. These cranes are amazing for 1887. They can lift 4 tons at a time. That's as heavy as 3 cars, but they're also slow and dangerous. One wrong move and tons of iron come crashing down. For the first few months, building the tower is almost like building any other iron structure. The workers are close to the ground. If something falls, it's dangerous but not deadly. If a worker slips, he might break a bone, but he'll probably survive. But as the tower grows taller, everything changes. By December 1887, the tower is about 90 feet tall. That's as tall as a 9-story building. Now when workers climb up to do their jobs, they're higher than most of the buildings in Paris. The wind blows harder up there. The iron is colder. The view down is terrifying. Francois Becker, our construction worker from Chapter 1, is one of the men climbing up there every day. He's what they call a riveter. His job is to heat up metal rivets until they're red hot, then hammer them through the pre-drilled holes to hold the iron pieces together. Each rivet has to be hammered in while it's still hot. If it cools down, it won't work right. Francois works with a team of 4 men. One man heats the rivets in a portable furnace. One man catches the red-hot rivet with tongs when it's thrown to him. Francois hammers the rivet into place. A 4th man holds the other side of the rivet with another tool. It's incredibly dangerous work. The rivets are more than 18 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause terrible burns. The men are working on narrow iron beams, sometimes just 8 inches wide. One wrong step and they fall. One missed catch and a red-hot piece of metal burns through their clothes and skin. They do this all day long, every day, through summer heat and winter cold, rain and wind and fog. The tower uses 2.5 million rivets. Each one has to be hammered in by hand. If you do the math, that's about 28 rivets per day for the 300 workers over 22 months. That means Francois and his team probably hammered in about 30 rivets every single day they worked. 30 chances to get burned, 30 chances to drop something, 30 chances to slip and fall. Meanwhile, down on the ground, Parisians gather to watch. Some are amazed, some are horrified. The tower is growing faster than anyone expected. By March 1888, it's 150 feet tall. By May, it's 200 feet. By September, it's 380 feet, taller than any building in Paris, and people start to panic. The artists' protest from February 1887 starts to seem less dramatic and more reasonable. This thing really is huge. This thing really is blocking the view. This thing really does look like a giant iron skeleton looming over the beautiful city. Newspapers run cartoons showing the tower crushing Paris, showing it falling over and destroying buildings, showing it as a monster, as a prison, as a threat. But Eiffel doesn't stop. The workers don't stop. Francois Becker doesn't stop climbing, doesn't stop hammering, doesn't stop risking his life 30 times a day, because here's what most people don't understand. These workers aren't just following orders, they're being paid well. A skilled riveter like Francois makes about 8 francs per day. That's about $42 in today's money. That doesn't sound like much now, but in 1887, when most workers make 3 or 4 francs per day, it's really good money. Francois can feed his family, he can pay his rent, he can save a little bit. And for a working man in Paris in 1887, that's worth the risk. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's building is that 300 families bet on iron rising, even while the ground beneath them trembled with doubt. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower as a machine begins with a simple question: how do you get people up there? It's March 1889. The tower is finished. It's 984 feet tall, the tallest structure in the world. It has 3 levels where people can stand. The first level is 187 feet up. The second level is 377 feet up. The top level is 906 feet up. That's a lot of stairs. In fact, there are 1665 steps from the ground to the top. If you climb them all, it would be like climbing a 75-story building. Eiffel knows most people won't climb all those stairs, so he installs elevators. But here's the problem. In 1889, elevator technology is still pretty new. Nobody has ever built an elevator that goes this high at this angle. See, the Eiffel Tower isn't straight up and down like a regular building. It curves. It gets narrower as it goes up, so the elevators can't just go straight up. They have to travel at an angle, following the curve of the tower's legs. Eiffel hires different companies to build different elevator systems. For the tower's 4 legs from ground to first level, he uses a French company called Roux, Combeluzier and Lepip. They build hydraulic elevators powered by water pressure. For the first level to second level, he uses an American company called Otis. For second level to top, he uses Otis again. These elevators are engineering marvels. The hydraulic ones use massive pistons filled with water. When water pushes into the piston, the elevator goes up. When water drains out, the elevator goes down. It's simple, but it works. Each elevator car holds about 50 people. It takes about 8 minutes to go from the ground to the first level. Then another elevator takes you from first to second level. That's about 5 minutes. Then a third elevator takes you from second level to the top, another 7 minutes. So if you want to go from bottom to top, you're looking at 20 minutes of elevator riding, plus waiting time at each level. On a busy day, you might wait an hour just to start your journey up, but people don't care. They're amazed, they've never been this high before. The view is incredible. Meanwhile, the tower needs workers to keep it running every single day, not the construction workers from before. Those jobs are done. Now it needs a different kind of worker, the invisible kind. The tower employs elevator operators. These men, they're all men in 1889, stand in the elevators all day long, going up and down, up and down, up and down. They collect tickets, they tell people where to stand, they warn people not to lean out, they operate the controls. An elevator operator in 1889 makes about 5 francs per day. That's about $26 today. It's not great money, but it's steady work, and you get an amazing view. The tower employs ticket sellers. They sit in little booths at the bottom, selling tickets and making change. A ticket to the first level costs 2 francs, about $10 today. A ticket to the second level costs 3 francs, about $16. A ticket all the way to the top costs 5 francs, about $26. The tower employs security guards. Their job is to stop people from doing stupid things, and people try to do a lot of stupid things on the Eiffel Tower. They try to climb over railings. They try to drop things off the edge. They try to carve their names into the iron. One man even tries to ride his bicycle down the stairs from the first level. The guards stop him. The tower employs maintenance workers. These are the most important invisible workers. Every single day they climb up and down the tower, checking for rust, checking for loose rivets, checking for cracks, checking for any sign of damage. Because here's the thing about iron, it rusts. Water and air make it rust. And rust makes it weak. So every few years, the entire tower has to be painted to protect the iron from rusting. Painting the Eiffel Tower takes 60 tons of paint and 18 months of work. It's been painted 19 times since 1889. Right now, as you read this, somebody is probably up there painting it. The tower also employs restaurant workers. Yes, there are restaurants on the Eiffel Tower. In 1889, there's one on the first level and one on the second level. You can eat lunch while looking out over Paris. The restaurants have waiters, cooks, dishwashers, and managers. They have to carry all the food and drinks up in the elevators. They have to carry all the dirty dishes down. Then there are the bathroom cleaners. Yes, the tower has bathrooms, and somebody has to clean them every day, multiple times per day. These workers are among the lowest paid and least respected, but they're absolutely necessary. Without them, the tower would be disgusting. Add it all up, and the Eiffel Tower employs about 200 people in its first year. 200 people whose job is to make sure the 7,000 daily visitors have a good time. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower as a machine is that for every one person who rides to the top and sees the view, there are 30 workers making sure the machine keeps running, going up and down in elevators, cleaning bathrooms, checking for rust, painting in the wind, selling tickets, stopping idiots from killing themselves. The tower doesn't run itself. It never has. It's a machine powered by invisible humans, just like every other machine we call modern. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's glory days begins with a number: 1,968,287. That's how many people visited the Eiffel Tower during the 1889 World's Fair. The fair lasted 6 months, from May 6 to October 31, 1889. That means an average of 10,935 people climbed the tower every single day. Think about that. Almost 11,000 people every day for 6 months straight, standing in line, buying tickets, cramming into elevators, walking upstairs, standing on the platforms, looking at the view, taking photographs, eating in the restaurants. Buying souvenirs. It was the most popular attraction at the World's Fair, more popular than the fountain, more popular than the village negger, a racist exhibit showing African people in native villages that we should be ashamed of today. More popular than the Gallery of Machines, more popular than Edison's phonograph demonstration. People came from all over the world, rich people, poor people, kings and queens, artists and writers, Americans, Russians, Japanese, Brazilians. Everyone wanted to see the tallest structure on Earth. Thomas Edison visited on August 10, 1889. He went to the top. He signed Eiffel's guest book. He wrote, "To M. Eiffel the engineer, the brave builder of so gigantic and original specimen of modern engineering, from one who has the greatest respect and admiration for all engineers, including the great engineer the bon Dieu, Thomas Edison." The Prince of Wales visited. Sarah Bernhardt, the most famous actress in the world, visited. Buffalo Bill came with his Wild West show and climbed to the top wearing his cowboy hat. But the glory days weren't just about famous visitors. They were about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. On the opening day, May 15, 1889, the elevators weren't working yet. They weren't ready. So if you wanted to go to the top, you had to climb all 1665 steps. Gustave Eiffel himself led a group of government officials up those stairs. It took them more than an hour. Eiffel was 56 years old, and he climbed every single step. When he got to the top, he raised the French flag. Cannons fired, crowds cheered below. That first day, even though the elevators didn't work, 30,000 people bought tickets. Most of them only went to the first level. But some, the brave ones, the young ones, the stubborn ones, climbed all the way to the top. Meanwhile, Eiffel was counting his money. Remember, he had invested 5 million francs of his own money into this tower. That's about $26 million today. If the tower failed, if people didn't come, he would be ruined. But people came. Boy, did they come. During the World's Fair, the tower made 6,859,140 francs from ticket sales. That's about $35.7 million in today's money. Eiffel had to share some of that money with the government and with his investors, but he still made a profit of about 1 million francs, around $5.2 million today. In just 6 months, Eiffel made his money back and then some. The dark story here is simple. Eiffel became very, very rich because millions of people paid to stand somewhere high and look down. But the glory days weren't just about money and visitors. They were also about changing what people thought was possible. Before the Eiffel Tower, the tallest structure in the world was the Washington Monument in America, finished in 1884. It's 555 feet tall, about 430 feet shorter than the Eiffel Tower, and it's made of stone, solid, heavy, traditional stone. The Eiffel Tower proved that iron could go higher. It proved that modern materials and modern engineering could beat ancient methods. It proved that France was still a leader in technology and innovation, even though other countries like Britain and America were building more factories and making more money. The tower became a symbol of progress, a symbol of the future, a symbol of what human beings could do when they stopped thinking small. Scientists loved it. They used it for experiments. In 1890, just 1 year after it opened, a scientist named Gustave Ferrier installed a radio antenna on the top. He used the tower to send wireless messages. Later, the tower would be used for weather observations, for astronomy, for studying wind and air pressure. Artists started to change their minds. Not all of them. Guy de Maupassant still ate lunch at the tower's restaurant to avoid seeing it, but some of them. Painters started putting the tower in their paintings. Photographers took pictures of it from every angle. Poets wrote poems about it. One writer, Jean Cocteau, later said, "The Eiffel Tower is the Notre Dame of the left bank." He meant it was becoming as important and as loved as the famous cathedral. But here's the dark part of the glory days. While millions of people were having the time of their lives, while Eiffel was getting rich, while France was celebrating, the workers who built the tower were already forgotten. Nobody interviewed Francois Becker about what it was like to rivet iron 400 feet in the air. Nobody wrote newspaper articles about the elevator operators who went up and down 50 times a day. Nobody thanked the men who dug the foundations in freezing mud. The glory went to Eiffel. The glory went to France. The glory went to the tower itself. The workers, they got their wages and went home. By October 31, 1889, when the World's Fair ended, the Eiffel Tower had proven everyone wrong. The artists who called it useless were wrong. It was the most popular attraction in Paris. The people who called it monstrous were wrong. It was beautiful. The critics who said it would ruin Paris were wrong. It made Paris more famous than ever. But the tower was still temporary. The contract said it would stand for 20 years, until 1909. After that, the city of Paris could tear it down. The glory days of the Eiffel Tower would only last if someone could find a reason to keep it standing. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's cracks begins on November 1, 1889, the day after the World's Fair ended. Suddenly, the crowds disappeared. Yesterday, 10,000 people climbed the tower. Today, maybe 500. The restaurants went from packed to empty. The elevator operators went from busy to bored. Eiffel had made his money during the fair, but now he faced a new question. Would people still visit the tower when there wasn't a World's Fair happening? The answer was, some people, but not nearly as many. In 1890, about 393,000 people visited the tower. That sounds like a lot, but it's only 20% of the number who visited during the fair, and it's not enough to make Eiffel rich. Remember, he had to pay for elevator maintenance, worker salaries, paint, repairs, and all the other costs of keeping the tower running. The tower was making money, but not a lot, not enough to guarantee it would survive. Meanwhile, the enemies of the tower, the artists, the critics, the traditionalists, started speaking up again. They had been quiet during the World's Fair because the tower was so popular. You can't really complain about something when 1 million people are lining up to see it. But now the fair was over. Now they could say, see, people don't really want this ugly iron thing. Let's tear it down like we originally planned. Edouard Lacre, the Minister of Commerce who had approved the tower, was no longer in power. The new government officials didn't care about the tower the way Lacre had. Some of them actively wanted it gone. The contract said the tower would stand until 1909, 20 years from 1889. After that, the city of Paris would decide, keep it or demolish it. As the 1890s went on, the demolish it side got stronger and louder. Here's why. The tower didn't really do anything useful. Yes, it was tall. Yes, people could visit it and see a great view, but Paris had other tall buildings. Paris had other views. The tower was unique, but it wasn't necessary. If you're the city government of Paris in 1895 and you're trying to decide if you should keep paying to maintain this giant iron structure, you ask yourself, what's it for? And the honest answer is, not much. It's just there, looking tall, being famous. That's not enough. Gustave Eiffel knew this. He knew that if the tower didn't become useful for something, it would get torn down in 1909. So he started looking for ways to make the tower useful. He allowed scientists to use it for experiments. They hung instruments from the tower to measure wind speed. They dropped things from the top to test air resistance. They measured atmospheric pressure at different heights. In 1898, Eugene Ducretet used the tower to send wireless telegraph messages to the Pantheon, a building 2.5 miles away. It worked. The tower was tall enough to be a really good radio antenna. This was the first crack of hope, the first sign that the tower might have a real purpose. Then, in 1903, a military engineer named Gustave Ferrier installed a permanent wireless telegraph station at the tower. The French military started using the tower to send radio messages. In 1906, they built a more powerful radio transmitter. The tower could now send messages up to 400 miles away. Suddenly, the Eiffel Tower wasn't just a tourist attraction. It was a military communications tool. It was strategically important, but there's a dark story hiding in this hope. The tower was saved by war. Or more specifically, by the fear of war. In the early 1900s, France and Germany were enemies. They had fought a war in 1870-71, and France had lost. The French military was preparing for another war. They knew it was coming, they just didn't know when. The radio transmitter on the Eiffel Tower became a key part of France's military strategy. If war came, they could use the tower to send messages to their troops, to their navy, to their allies. In 1909, when the 20-year contract expired and the city of Paris had to decide whether to tear down the tower, the military said, "No, we need it, don't tear it down." So the tower was saved, not because it was beautiful, not because people loved it, but because it was useful for war. This is the dark story of the Eiffel Tower's cracks. It survived because it became a weapon. Meanwhile, the workers who kept the tower running, the elevator operators, the maintenance crew, the restaurant staff, the ticket sellers, they had no idea how close they came to losing their jobs. They showed up every day, did their work, went home. They didn't know that in government offices and military headquarters, important men were deciding whether their workplace would exist next year. And François Becker, our riveter from the construction days, he was 45 years old in 1909. He was probably still working construction somewhere in Paris, building ordinary buildings, doing ordinary work. He probably saw the tower every day from wherever he was working. He probably thought, I helped build that. He probably had no idea that the tower had almost been torn down. He probably assumed it would stand forever because it was so tall and so famous. But nothing stands forever just because it's tall and famous. Things stand because someone decides they're worth keeping. And that decision is usually about money or power or usefulness, not about beauty or history or the sweat of 300 workers. The Eiffel Tower's cracks were real. The tower almost died. But it was saved by a radio antenna and the fear of war. Sometimes the things we love survive for reasons that have nothing to do with love. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's crisis begins on August 3, 1914. The day Germany declared war on France. The day World War I began. The Eiffel Tower's radio transmitter, the thing that saved the tower from demolition, now became one of the most important military tools in France. The tower transmitted messages to French troops. It picked up German radio signals and helped French intelligence intercept enemy communications. It sent warnings about German attacks. It coordinated French defenses. On September 5, 1914, the tower's radio station intercepted a German message that helped the French army win the First Battle of the Marne. This was a huge, crucial battle. If France had lost, Germany might have captured Paris. The war might have been over in weeks, but France won, partly because of information intercepted by the Eiffel Tower's radio. The tower had become a legitimate military target. If German planes could destroy the tower's radio station, they would hurt France badly. But the tower was 984 feet tall and made of iron lattice, very hard to hit. German bombers tried a few times but never succeeded. Meanwhile, tourism stopped completely. Who visits a tower during a war? Who buys tickets to see Paris when German artillery is trying to reach the city? The restaurants closed. Most of the elevator operators were sent to fight in the war. The ticket sellers went home. The tower went quiet. For 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, the Eiffel Tower was a military fortress, not a tourist attraction. But the real crisis came after the war ended. By 1918, the tower was in rough shape. No tourists meant no maintenance money. The paint was chipping, rust was spreading, parts of the iron structure were corroding. The elevators needed repairs, everything needed attention, and France was broke. World War I had cost France enormous amounts of money and lives. Over 1.3 million French soldiers died. Millions more were wounded. Entire regions of France were destroyed. The country was in mourning and in debt. Nobody cared about the Eiffel Tower. The government had bigger problems: rebuilding destroyed towns, helping wounded veterans, paying war debts, feeding hungry people. In 1920, Gustave Eiffel died. He was 88 years old. He died never knowing if his tower would survive long-term. He had saved it once in 1909 by making it useful for radio. But now it was 1920, and the tower was falling apart, and nobody seemed to care. Here's the crisis. The Eiffel Tower, the most famous landmark in France, was rotting. And everyone was too tired and too poor and too sad to fix it. Then something unexpected happened, something nobody planned for. American tourists started coming to Paris. See, America had fought in World War II, but American cities hadn't been bombed. American farms hadn't been destroyed. America came out of the war richer and more powerful than before, and Americans had money to spend. In the 1920s, thousands of Americans moved to Paris or visited Paris. Writers like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, artists like Man Ray, musicians, dancers, rich people looking for adventure. They all came to Paris because it was beautiful and cheap, if you had American dollars, and exciting, and they all wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. In 1922, visitor numbers started going back up. Not to World's Fair levels, but better. In 1925, the tower had 480,000 visitors. In 1928, it had 620,000 visitors. The ticket money started flowing again. The French government realized this tower is valuable, not just for radio but for tourism. Foreign tourists, especially rich Americans, will pay money to climb it, and France needs that money, so they started fixing the tower. They repainted it, they repaired the elevators, they reopened the restaurants, they hired back the workers. The crisis ended not because the French people fell back in love with the tower, but because foreigners, especially Americans, wanted to see it. The tower was saved by tourists with cameras and money, but there's a darker layer to this crisis story. While the tower was being saved by American tourism, the workers who had built it were dying in poverty. Francois Becker, our riveter, died in 1921 at age 57. He died poor, in a small apartment in Paris. Nobody wrote about his death in the newspapers. Nobody remembered that he had helped build the most famous tower in the world. He was just another old construction worker who ran out of money and died. His daughter Marie kept one possession from his tower days: a small piece of iron about the size of a finger that Francois had brought home from the construction site in 1888. She kept it in a drawer for 60 years. When she died in 1981, her grandson found it. He donated it to the Eiffel Tower Museum. That small piece of iron is all that remains of Francois Becker's contribution to the tower. No plaque with his name, no statue, no acknowledgement. Just a small piece of metal in a glass case. Meanwhile, Gustave Eiffel has a statue at the base of the tower. His name is on everything. His apartment at the top of the tower is preserved as a museum. Everyone knows his name. Nobody knows Francois Becker's name. Nobody knows the names of the other 299 workers who built the tower. Nobody knows the name of the one worker who died during construction. We'll get to that story soon. This is the dark story of the Eiffel Tower's crisis. The tower was saved twice, once by radio technology and the military, once by American tourists and their money, but the men who built it were never saved. They lived hard lives, did dangerous work, and died forgotten. The tower survived because it became useful and then profitable. The workers were never useful enough or profitable enough to be remembered. In 1929, on the 40th anniversary of the tower's opening, Paris threw a big celebration. Officials gave speeches about how the tower symbolized France's resilience and creativity. Tourists took photographs. The newspapers wrote glowing articles, but they didn't invite any of the surviving construction workers. They didn't mention their names. They didn't honor their work. The crisis had passed. The tower was safe. But the workers were still invisible, just like they'd always been. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's transformation begins with lights, lots and lots of lights. In 1925, André Citroën, the French car manufacturer, made a deal with the city of Paris. He paid to install 250,000 electric light bulbs on the Eiffel Tower. These lights spelled out his company name, Citroën, in huge letters that could be seen from 20 miles away. This was advertising. The Eiffel Tower had become a giant billboard. At night, the tower lit up with Citroën's name in red, yellow, and orange lights. It was spectacular, it was tacky, it was modern. It showed that the tower was no longer just a symbol of France's industrial might or a military tool. It was also a product, something you could rent, something you could use to sell cars. The lights stayed up until 1936. Then they were taken down because the electrical system was getting old and dangerous. But the message was clear. The Eiffel Tower was transforming from a monument into a commodity, from something sacred into something for sale. During World War II, the tower transformed again, this time into a symbol of resistance and occupation. On June 14, 1940, German troops marched into Paris. The Nazis had won. France had fallen. The swastika flag flew from the top of the Eiffel Tower, but French workers at the tower, the elevator operators, the maintenance crew, they did something brave. They sabotaged the elevators. They made it look like a mechanical failure, but really, they deliberately broke them so the Nazis couldn't ride to the top. Adolf Hitler visited Paris on June 23, 1940. He wanted to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, but the elevators were broken. Hitler was 51 years old and apparently not interested in climbing 1665 steps, so he stayed on the ground. He took some photographs at the base of the tower and left. The French workers had won a small victory. Hitler conquered France, but he didn't get to stand at the top of the Eiffel Tower. It wasn't much, but it was something. The elevators stayed broken for the entire Nazi occupation, 4 years. German soldiers who wanted to go to the top had to climb. Most didn't bother. Meanwhile, the French resistance used the tower for secret radio transmissions. They hid radio equipment in the structure and sent messages to the Allies. The Germans never found it. In August 1944, when Paris was liberated from the Nazis, French soldiers raised the French flag on top of the tower again. The elevators mysteriously started working within days. This was the Eiffel Tower's transformation during the war, from a symbol of France to a symbol of occupation, to a symbol of resistance to a symbol of liberation, all in 4 years. After the war, the tower transformed again, this time into what we might call postcard Paris, the image of Paris that the whole world recognizes. In the 1950s and 1960s, tourism exploded. Not just American tourists anymore, but tourists from everywhere. Japan, Brazil, Australia, India. Everyone wanted to visit Europe, and when you visit Paris, you go to the Eiffel Tower. The tower appeared in hundreds of movies. It appeared in thousands of photographs. It appeared on millions of postcards, posters, t-shirts, magnets, keychains, snow globes, and pencil holders. Ask anyone in the world, what does Paris look like? They'll describe the Eiffel Tower. Not Notre Dame Cathedral, not the Arc de Triomphe, not the Louvre Museum, the Eiffel Tower. This transformation happened slowly over decades, but it was total. The tower went from being a controversial structure that many Parisians hated to being the single image that represents Paris to the entire world. By 1964, 75 years after it opened, the tower had welcomed 100 million visitors total. By 1989, 100 years after opening, it had welcomed 175 million visitors. Today, in 2025, more than 300 million people have climbed the Eiffel Tower. That's more than the entire population of the United States. But here's the dark part of this transformation. As the tower became more famous, it became less French, or more specifically, it became global property. It belongs to the world now, not just to France. A Japanese tourist who visits the Eiffel Tower, takes photographs, buys a souvenir keychain, and goes home. They feel like the tower is theirs too. It's part of their Paris experience. It's part of their Instagram feed. It's part of their memories. And they're right. The tower does belong to them in a way. When something becomes that famous, that photographed, that reproduced, it stops belonging to one country and starts belonging to everyone who's seen it. The transformation is complete when the copy becomes more familiar than the original. Millions of people have seen photographs of the Eiffel Tower who have never been to Paris. Millions of people own little Eiffel Tower souvenirs who have never climbed the real one. Millions of people can recognize the Eiffel Tower instantly, but they couldn't tell you who built it or when or why. Francois Becker's grandson, Pierre Becker, visited the tower in 1975. He was 60 years old. He brought his grandchildren. He told them, "Your great-great-grandfather helped build this." The kids were impressed for about 5 seconds, then they wanted ice cream. Pierre tried to find his grandfather's name somewhere on the tower, on a plaque, on a wall, in a museum, anywhere. He couldn't find it because it wasn't there. It still isn't there. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's transformation is that it became the most famous building in the world, but the people who built it disappeared from history completely. The tower transformed from controversial to beloved, from French to global, from monument to commodity, from structure to symbol, but it never transformed into a memorial for the workers. It never became a place that honors Francois Becker and the 299 other men who risked their lives to build it. That transformation never happened, and probably never will. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's present begins with a number, 25,000. That's how many LED lights cover the Eiffel Tower today. Every night on the hour, these lights sparkle for 5 minutes. Tourists stop walking. They stare up, they pull out their phones, they record videos, they post them on Instagram and TikTok with the hashtag number Eiffel Tower. More than 300 million posts on Instagram use that hashtag. The Eiffel Tower is one of the most photographed objects on Earth, possibly the most photographed, more than the pyramids, more than the Grand Canyon, more than the Statue of Liberty. But here's the dark part. Technically, taking photographs of the Eiffel Tower at night and posting them online might be illegal. Wait, what? Here's the story. The Eiffel Tower itself is in the public domain. That means nobody owns the design. You can photograph it. You can paint it, you can draw it. You can sell your photographs or paintings. That's all legal. But the light show, the sparkling lights that go off every night, was designed in 1985 by a lighting engineer named Pierre Becker. Under European copyright law, that light display is protected by copyright. Pierre Becker's company technically owns the rights to the illuminated Eiffel Tower. So if you take a photograph of the sparkling tower at night and sell it or use it commercially, you might be violating copyright. The Eiffel Tower Operating Company, called SETE, says you need permission to use nighttime images commercially. Do they actually enforce this? Rarely. Millions of people post Eiffel Tower night photos every year and nothing happens to them. But technically, legally, it's complicated. This is the dark story of the present. Even the Eiffel Tower, this symbol of Paris, this public landmark, is wrapped up in copyright and ownership and legal complexity. Meanwhile, the tower faces modern problems that Gustave Eiffel never imagined. Problem number 1, too many people. The tower was designed for maybe 10,000 visitors per day during the World's Fair. Today, on a busy summer day, 25,000 people visit. That's more than twice what it was built for. The elevators are crowded, the staircases are crowded, the platforms are crowded, the bathrooms are crowded, everything is crowded. In 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic, the tower had almost 6.2 million visitors. That's an average of 17,000 per day, every single day, all year long. Problem number 2, terrorism. The Eiffel Tower has been the target of terrorist plots multiple times. In 2017, French police found weapons and radical Islamic materials in an apartment near the tower, suggesting a possible attack was being planned. The tower was evacuated twice in 2020 due to bomb threats, both false alarms. The tower now has bulletproof glass walls around its base, metal detectors at every entrance, armed guards, bag searches, security cameras everywhere. It looks more like an airport than a monument. This is necessary. The tower is a symbol, and symbols attract people who want to destroy symbols, but it also changes the experience. You don't just walk up to the Eiffel Tower anymore. You wait in a security line first. Problem number 3, rust and metal fatigue. Iron doesn't last forever. The tower is 136 years old. That's old for a metal structure. Engineers constantly monitor it for cracks, for rust, for weak points. Every 7 years, the tower gets completely repainted. The current paint job started in 2019 and is scheduled to finish in 2025, 6 years of continuous painting. The tower has been repainted 19 times since 1889. Each time, workers have to strip off the old paint, treat any rust, and apply new paint. It takes 60 tons of paint to cover the entire tower. And who does this painting? Workers. Working men, now some women too, who climb up the tower with paint cans and brushes and rollers. It's dangerous work, it's skilled work, it's hard work. In 2023, one of these painters was a 42-year-old man named Hassan Fade. He's been painting the tower for 12 years. He climbs sections of the tower that tourists never see. He hangs from ropes and harnesses, painting iron beams 600 feet above the ground. He makes about 2,800 euros per month. That's about $3,000 in American money. It's decent pay, but not amazing. Not for the danger, not for the skill required. Hassan told a reporter in 2023, "People take pictures of the tower every day, but nobody takes pictures of us. We're invisible." That quote could have come from Francois Becker in 1888. Same job, same invisibility, 135 years apart. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's present is that it's more famous than ever, more photographed than ever, more visited than ever, but the workers who maintain it are still invisible. Still forgotten, still doing dangerous work for okay money while millions of tourists snap selfies below them. Problem number 4, climate change. This might sound weird, but climate change is affecting the Eiffel Tower. On really hot days, the metal expands. The tower can grow up to 6 inches taller when the iron heats up. On cold days, it shrinks. The iron also expands and contracts with temperature changes, which can create tiny cracks over time. Engineers have to watch for these cracks, because if the iron fails, people could die. In 2022, during a record-breaking heat wave in Paris, the tower had to close for a day because the metal expanded so much that the elevator mechanisms didn't line up properly anymore. Too dangerous to operate. This is going to happen more often as the planet gets hotter. The tower that was built in 1889 wasn't designed for the temperatures of 2025. And it definitely wasn't designed for the temperatures of 2050. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's present is this: the world's most famous landmark is slowly, quietly, invisibly falling apart. And only the invisible workers who climb it every day really know how bad it is. The dark story of the workers begins with a name that nobody knows: Payroll. That's all we have, just his last name. Payroll. We don't know his first name. We don't know how old he was. We don't know if he was married or had children. We don't know what city he was from. We only know 3 things about Payroll. He worked on the construction of the Eiffel Tower. He died on the tower in 1888. He's the only worker who officially died during construction. The official story says only 1 worker died building the Eiffel Tower. That's remarkably low for such a dangerous project. For comparison, when they built the Brooklyn Bridge in New York from 1869 to 1883, at least 27 workers died. When they built the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco from 1933 to 1937, 11 workers died. So only 1 death on the Eiffel Tower sounds almost miraculous. Except here's the dark story. Official deaths don't count everyone. Payroll died on the job site. His death got recorded. His death got counted. But what about the worker who went home with a headache after breathing iron dust all day and died 3 days later? Not counted. What about the worker who fell from a scaffold, broke his back, and died in the hospital 2 weeks later? Not counted, because he didn't die on site. What about the worker who developed lung disease from breathing paint fumes and metal particles and died 5 years later? Not counted, because how can you prove the tower killed him? The 1 death statistic is technically true. But it hides a larger truth. Construction work in 1887 was incredibly dangerous. Many workers got hurt. Some of those hurt workers probably died from their injuries, but they didn't get counted in the official death toll. Even Gustave Eiffel admitted this, sort of. In his memoirs, he wrote, "We were fortunate to have only 1 fatality. 1, as if 1 was the actual number." But then he added, "Though several workers were injured in ways that prevented them from returning to work." What does "prevented them from returning to work" mean? It means permanent injuries, crushed hands, broken legs that healed wrong, blindness from sparks, burns that scarred, injuries that ended careers, injuries that left men unable to provide for their families. How many workers were injured this way? Eiffel doesn't say. The records don't say. Nobody counted. This is the dark story. The tower was built on 1 official death and many unofficial casualties. But let's talk about the workers we do know about, the ones who survived, the ones who made it to the top. The rivet teams, like Francois Becker's team, were the most skilled and most highly paid workers. They made up about 1/3 of the workforce, about 100 men. The iron workers, the men who positioned the iron beams and bolted them into place, made up another third. Another 100 men, the rest were general laborers. They carried materials, they operated cranes, they dug foundations, they mixed cement, they did all the unglamorous, necessary work. Most of these workers were French, but not all. Some were Italian immigrants, some were Belgian, some were Spanish. They came to Paris looking for work and the tower was hiring. They worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week. That's 60 hours per week, in all weather. In summer heat and winter cold, in rain and wind and fog. They started work at 7 a.m. They got a 30-minute break for lunch. They finished at 5:30 p.m. Then they went home to tiny apartments in the poor neighborhoods of Paris, ate dinner, slept, and did it all again the next day, for 22 months. The highest paid workers, the skilled riveters, made about 8 francs per day. That's about $42 today. Multiply that by 300 working days, 6 days per week for 50 weeks, and they made about $12,600 per year in today's money. That's below the poverty line in most developed countries today, but in 1887 Paris, it was decent working-class money. The lowest paid workers, the general laborers, made about 3 francs per day. That's about $16 today, about $4,800 per year. That's extreme poverty, even by 1887 standards. These men risked their lives for wages that barely fed their families. And when the tower was finished, when the World's Fair opened, when Gustave Eiffel raised the French flag on top and cannons fired and crowds cheered, where were the workers? They weren't invited to the ceremony. They weren't mentioned in the speeches. They weren't interviewed by newspapers. They weren't thanked. They were just done, job finished. Move on to the next construction site. Some of them came back years later as paying visitors. They climbed to the first level, looked around and thought, I built this. But there was no way to prove it. No badge, no certificate, no record. In 1937, on the tower's 50th anniversary, the French government held a big celebration. They invited Gustave Eiffel's descendants. They invited government officials. They invited famous people. Did they invite any surviving construction workers? No. By 1937, most of them were dead anyway. The ones who were still alive were old men, forgotten men, poor men. In 1989, on the tower's 100th anniversary, France held an even bigger celebration. Fireworks, concerts, speeches. The president of France gave a speech praising Gustave Eiffel's vision and genius. Did he mention the 300 workers? Did he mention Peyral, the man who died? Did he mention the injured workers who couldn't return to work? No. Because the story of the Eiffel Tower, the story taught in schools, the story told to tourists, the story in the guidebooks, is about one brilliant man and his iron dream. It's not about 300 working men and their dangerous labor. This is the dark story of the workers. They built the most famous landmark in the world, and then they disappeared. Their names aren't on plaques. Their faces aren't in photographs. Their stories aren't in museums. Except for Francois Becker's small piece of iron in a glass case. Except for Peyral's last name in an old accident report. Except for a few scattered mentions in Eiffel's memoirs. That's all that's left. 300 men. 22 months, 2.5 million rivets. 1 official death. Many unofficial casualties. 0 recognition. The Eiffel Tower stands because they stood on iron beams 300 feet in the air and hammered rivets until their hands bled. But when you visit the tower, nobody tells you that. Nobody even thinks about it. That's the dark story. That's what we forget. The dark story of the Eiffel Tower's reckoning begins with a question that nobody likes to ask. What does the tower actually mean? We say it's a symbol of Paris. We say it's a symbol of France. We say it's a symbol of romance, of innovation, of human achievement. We say it represents the beauty of engineering and the triumph of imagination. But what does it really mean when you look at the full, honest story? It means that beauty often comes from exploitation. That 300 workers risked their lives so that millions of rich tourists could take selfies. That one man got famous and wealthy, while hundreds of men stayed poor and anonymous. That we remember the architect but forget the builders. That we celebrate the vision but ignore the labor. This is the reckoning. This is the moment when we ask, who really built the Eiffel Tower? The easy answer is Gustave Eiffel. His name is on it. He gets the credit. When you Google who built the Eiffel Tower, his name comes up. Not Maurice Koechlin, not Émile Naugaire, not Francois Becker, not Peyral, not the 300 workers, just Eiffel. But think about what that means. Eiffel designed the tower. No, Koechlin and Naugaire designed it. Eiffel bought their design. Eiffel financed the tower, partially. He put up some money, but the French government and private investors put up money too. Eiffel built the tower. No. He never hammered a single rivet. He never climbed a scaffold. He never risked his life. What Eiffel did was organize. He managed. He convinced. He promoted. He took the risk of failure. He defended the tower against critics. He made it happen. Those are real contributions. Those are important contributions. But they're not the same as the contributions of the workers who actually built the thing with their hands. Yet Eiffel's name is on the tower. The workers' names are nowhere. This happens all the time in history. The person who has the idea and the money gets remembered. The people who do the actual work get forgotten. Think about the pyramids in Egypt. We remember the pharaohs. We don't remember the thousands of workers who hauled limestone blocks in the desert sun. Think about the Great Wall of China. We remember the emperors who ordered it built. We don't remember the hundreds of thousands of workers who died building it. Think about any famous building, anywhere in the world. We remember the architect. We rarely remember the construction workers. The Eiffel Tower is just one more example of this pattern. But here's where the reckoning gets more complicated. Is this wrong, or is this just how things work? Some people would say. Look, Eiffel paid the workers fair wages for 1887. They agreed to do the work. They got paid. That's the deal. It's not Eiffel's fault they're not famous. Other people would say, fair wages. They risked their lives for barely enough money to survive. Eiffel got rich. They stayed poor. One of them died. Others got permanently injured. And now they're completely forgotten while Eiffel is celebrated as a genius. That's not fair. That's exploitation. Both arguments have some truth. The workers did agree to work. They did get paid. But they also had very few other options. If you're a poor construction worker in Paris in 1887 and someone offers you a dangerous job that pays slightly better than other dangerous jobs, you take it. Not because it's a great deal, because you need to feed your family. That's not really a free choice. That's desperation. And now, 136 years later, we live in a world where the Eiffel Tower makes millions of dollars every year from ticket sales, from restaurant revenue, from gift shop sales, from the rights to use its image. All of that money flows to the operating company, to the city of Paris, to various businesses. None of it flows to the descendants of the workers who built it. Francois Becker's great-great-great-grandchildren are alive today. They're probably living somewhere in France, doing ordinary jobs, making ordinary money. The Eiffel Tower brings in about 90 million euros per year. That's about $97 million. Francois' descendants get €0 of that. Is that fair? Is that how it should work? The answer depends on what you believe about labor and wealth and credit and history, but here's what's definitely not fair. The workers should at least be remembered, even if we can't pay them or their descendants, even if we decide that Eiffel deserves the main credit, even if we accept the economic system that made some people rich and other people poor. At the very least, we should remember their names. There should be a memorial at the base of the Eiffel Tower that lists all 300 workers by name. There should be information about how they built it. There should be recognition of their skill and their courage and their sacrifice. But there isn't. There's a statue of Gustave Eiffel. There's a museum about his life. There's his preserved apartment at the top of the tower. For the workers, nothing. Not even payroll. The man who died gets a plaque. That's not an economic question. That's not about capitalism or socialism or who deserves what money. That's just about basic human decency and historical honesty. The reckoning of the Eiffel Tower is this. We have to decide what kind of story we want to tell about it. Do we want to tell the simple story, brilliant architect, innovative design, engineering marvel, symbol of Paris? That's the story we've been telling for 136 years. It's a nice story. It makes people feel good. It's easy. Or do we want to tell the complicated story, the story that includes the workers, the danger, the death, the exploitation, the forgotten names? That story is harder. It's less comfortable. It forces us to think about who benefits from beautiful things and who pays the price for creating them. Most people prefer the simple story. It's more romantic. It's more inspiring. When you're standing at the base of the Eiffel Tower, looking up at that incredible iron structure reaching into the sky, you want to feel wonder. You don't want to think about Francois Becker hammering rivets in the freezing wind or payroll falling to his death. But maybe we should think about those things, not instead of feeling wonder, but alongside it. Maybe we can hold two truths at the same time. The Eiffel Tower is beautiful and amazing. And it was built by exploited workers whose names we don't remember. Both things are true. The reckoning is accepting both. So what's the lesson here? What does the story of the Eiffel Tower teach us that we can use today, in our own lives, in our own world? Here's what I think. I think the Eiffel Tower teaches us that the things we create say something true about who we are. Not just what we want to be, not just what we claim to be, but what we actually are. In 1887, France wanted to show the world that it was modern, innovative, and glorious, so they built the tallest structure on Earth. They succeeded. The tower did make France look modern and innovative and glorious. But the way they built it, paying workers barely enough to survive, taking few safety precautions, forgetting the workers as soon as the job was done, that also says something true about France in 1887. It says they valued the monument more than the people who built it. It says they cared more about looking impressive than about treating workers fairly. We can see the same pattern today, in 2025. We build amazing things. Smartphones that connect us to the whole world, built in factories where workers jump out of windows because conditions are so bad. Electric cars that will save the planet, built with lithium mined by children in Africa. Beautiful clothes that make us look good, sewn by women working 16-hour days in Bangladesh for $1 per day. We want the amazing things. We want the beautiful things. We want the impressive things. But we don't want to see the workers who make them. We don't want to know their names or their stories or their struggles. The Eiffel Tower has been teaching us this lesson for 136 years. We just haven't been paying attention, but maybe that's changing. Maybe we're starting to ask different questions. Maybe when we see something beautiful or impressive or amazing, we're starting to ask, who built this? Who was hurt making this? Who benefits from this? Who was forgotten? Those are good questions, hard questions, uncomfortable questions, but good. Now let me tell you about the present reality. About what the Eiffel Tower looks like today, right now, as you're reading this. Right now, at this exact moment, the Eiffel Tower is probably full of tourists. Maybe 2,000 people are on it, taking pictures, eating in the restaurants, buying souvenirs, looking at the view, posting on Instagram, making memories. And right now, there are probably 10 or 15 workers somewhere on that tower, painters on scaffolds, maintenance workers checking the elevators, security guards watching for threats, cleaners scrubbing bathrooms, ticket sellers making change. Those workers are invisible to the tourists. The tourists don't see them, don't think about them. Don't wonder about their lives or their families or their wages or their safety. Just like in 1887, nothing's changed, except maybe it has changed a little, because you're reading this. Because you're thinking about Francois Becker and payroll and the 300 workers. Because you're asking the uncomfortable questions. That's something. And here's another thing that's changed. There are small memorials starting to appear. Not at the Eiffel Tower, not yet, but at other famous landmarks. The Brooklyn Bridge now has a plaque honoring the workers who died building it. The Golden Gate Bridge has a memorial. The Hoover Dam lists the names of the workers who died during construction. Maybe someday the Eiffel Tower will too. Maybe someday there will be a memorial at the base listing all 300 workers. Maybe Francois Becker's name will be carved in stone alongside Gustave Eiffel's. Maybe Peyroll will be honored for his sacrifice. Maybe, but probably not, because the Eiffel Tower's story has been set for too long. The narrative is fixed, change is hard, but we can change our own narratives. We can tell better stories. We can remember the workers in our own families, our own communities, our own lives. We can honor the people who build things, who fix things, who maintain things, who make our comfortable lives possible while staying invisible. Now let me give you the question about the future. The question you should ask yourself. 100 years from now, in 2125, what will people say about us? What will they say about the things we built in the early 21st century? What will they say about how we treated the workers who built them? Will they look at our smartphones and our skyscrapers and our bridges and say, wow, they were so innovative? Or will they say, look at all this stuff they built on the backs of exploited workers in other countries? Will they remember the names of the CEOs and the entrepreneurs? Or will they wonder about the factory workers and the miners and the delivery drivers? Will they tell simple stories about brilliant inventors? Or will they tell complicated stories about global supply chains and hidden labor and forgotten names? The answer depends on what we do right now. The stories of 2125 are being written today, by us, by our choices, by what we pay attention to and what we ignore. Here's the human echo, the moment that brings it all back to one person, one life, one story. In 2019, a woman named Marie-Claire Mercier visited the Eiffel Tower. She was 87 years old. She brought her great-grandson, a 10-year-old boy named Lucas. Marie-Claire is Francois Becker's great-great-granddaughter. She never met Francois. He died 40 years before she was born. But she grew up hearing stories about him, about how he worked on the tower, about how he was proud of it, about how he kept that small piece of iron as a reminder. Marie-Claire and Lucas climbed to the first level. She showed him the iron beams. She told him, your great-great-great-great-grandfather hammered rivets that might be holding these beams together right now. You're standing on something he built with his hands. Lucas asked. Is his name anywhere? Marie-Claire said. No, Lucas asked. Why not? Marie-Claire said. Because the world doesn't remember workers, it remembers the rich and the famous. Lucas asked. Is that fair? Marie-Claire said. No. But that's how it is. Then Lucas said something that Marie-Claire would remember for the rest of her life. He said, then we have to remember for them. That's the human echo. A child understanding something that most adults refuse to see. That the only way to fix historical injustice is to remember, to tell the stories, to say the names, to insist that the workers matter as much as the architects. And here's the final line, the sentence that captures everything. The Eiffel Tower reaches toward the sky, but it stands on the shoulders of men whose names we'll never know. That's the dark story of the Eiffel Tower, not dark like evil, dark like hidden, dark like shadow. Dark like the truth we'd rather not see, but now you've seen it, now you know, now you can't unknow it. So here's my call to action for you. Next time you see something beautiful or impressive or amazing, a building, a bridge, a monument, a product, anything, ask yourself these 3 questions. Who built this? Were they treated fairly? Are they remembered? If you don't know the answers, try to find out. Look it up, read about it, think about it. And if you discover that the workers were exploited or forgotten or ignored, don't just feel bad about it and move on. Tell someone, share the story. Say the names if you know them. Insist that the full truth matters, because the Eiffel Tower will stand for another 100 years, probably another 200 years, maybe even longer. And every single day, thousands of people will visit it. They'll take pictures, they'll make memories, they'll see it as a symbol of Paris and romance and human achievement. That's fine, it is those things. But it's also a symbol of 300 forgotten workers, of Payroll, who died and whose first name we don't even know, of Francois Becker, who hammered rivets in the wind and kept one piece of iron and died poor, of Hassan Fade, who paints the tower today and says, "We're invisible." Remember them, remember all of them, not instead of admiring the tower, but while admiring the tower, hold both truths at once. This is beautiful. This was built by exploited workers. That's the dark story. That's the real story. That's the story that matters, and now it's yours to tell.